Happy Thursday. Happy Thursday. It's me, Nkoyo Efyang, that Law lady, and I am tuning in for Thursday Thoughts. And today we are going to discuss how to mentally prepare for an uncertain school year. So, our topic today is mentally preparing for what will undoubtedly be an uncertain school year. Um, if you're new to me, again, I am Nkoyo, principal attorney at the F. Young firm, an education law firm, advocating unapologetically for excellence, equity, and education justice alongside communities of color. We represent parents and students. We work with mission-driven businesses and leaders to make sure that we are creating the culture and community that we want to live in and we want our children's children to live in. So I'm excited to be here with you today to sort of talk through how we can mentally prepare for who knows what's going to happen. If you watch any bit of news anywhere that you are, you know that we have conflicting information day in and day out about whether our kids are starting school in school face to face, if they're going to be virtual, if they're going to be some sort of hybrid. We had a whole topsy-turvy moment here in Georgia where everyone said, finally, we're going to go to remote. And then they were like, no, we'll honor your choices. We're all over the place. And it feels like every single day the landscape keeps shifting. And that can be really disconcerting for a lot of people. And especially myself, I am a classic textbook type A person. I like to have a plan. I have a plan for the plan for the plan. And so all of this living in uncertainty, what will today bring, what will happen next week, is a little anxiety inducing. So if you are a parent like me or a business owner like me who's just sort of like, what gives? I can't continue to just sort of be pulled from side to side. This conversation today is absolutely for you. I'm going to give you four steps, four things to do to sort of create structure in what is unstructurable, I guess, right? To create a little piece of sanity for yourself as we move through what will be a unique school year and probably a very unique end to the 2020 year. So with that, I'm just going to jump on in. Today's talk or thoughts are probably going to be a little different than others. I'm not necessarily going to give you any specific tips around how to advocate for your child in school or even how to sort of run your organization more effectively. Today, we're really just going to focus on high level life type stuff. Like, how do we do this? And it's really became something I was really convinced would be important to do after having a conversation with countless other mothers like myself who are running businesses and raising babies and trying to figure out how we're going to homeschool and show up in our careers and in our businesses the way that we want to. And I just want to say, again, that the task before us is a tall task. It is not unusual. We're not failing if we're feeling like this is overwhelming or incredibly difficult to do, because what we're being asked to do is a lot of stuff. I'm a former teacher, so I know that teaching children takes a lot of work, a lot more work than I think we give teachers and educators credit for, unfortunately. It's a lot. It is a lot of planning. It's a lot of execution. It's a lot of finding within yourself how to be creative, how to adjust on the fly. And that's also the reality when you are in your career, especially if you're running a business. It requires you to wear many different hats, to think about 1,000 different things, to make an insane amount of decisions every single day. So for all of my caregivers who are now feeling like, I don't know how I'm going to do another 10 months of this. I don't know how to do another 2 weeks of this. I want to help you sort of think through how we can make this less hectic and crazy because, one, it benefits us in our businesses and our lives as we're building them. And it also benefits our children who, if they're going to be at home with us, are definitely going to be absorbing a lot of both our said and unsaid emotions. And so I think it's just really important for us to try to figure out how we, particularly as women, I can only speak sort of from that lens, manage all of the things that are now on our plate. And it's a separate question, about whether they should all be on our plates and what really the private sector could be doing to sort of offset some of this challenge and difficulty, especially for working mothers. Recognizing that a lot of time the caretaker responsibilities fall disproportionately on women. And so I wish I had a magic wand and I could change all of that. But what I can help you do in this session, and what my goal is of this conversation, is to help you figure out ways to make things more palatable, manageable, while the ground continues to shift. So first things first, I'm going to say it. You're going to want to punch me in the face. I totally get it, because that's how I feel when people say it to me. But my first advice to you is to relax, to breathe. This too will most definitely pass, and we will all be stronger on the other side, right? Like they say, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. I mean, it doesn't feel like that in the process, but ultimately we will all have adapted and learned a crazy set of new skills that will be beneficial both in our parenting as well in our professions. So change is always uncomfortable. Change is always difficult. It pushes us to think outside of our comfort zone, and a lot of us are being forced to operate outside of that right now. And so I want you to do is relax, take some time to breathe, to accept that like this is what the circumstances are, and the ways that we have been doing things in the past probably are not going to work, or may not be as effective in the current reality. And that is okay. I also want to say, because I'm a hyper worrier, especially about my sons, and knowing that I'm raising Black boys, and so everything feels like high stakes. Like everything feels like I absolutely have to do this, get this done. It needs to be done great. They need to be performing at a high level all the time, because hopefully that will protect them in a country that doesn't necessarily love Black people. But the reality is our children are doing, for the most part, okay. We as people are able to adapt. Children in particular are very resilient. I think I had a friend share with me an article from Psychology Today that was showing that, like, on the whole, most kids have been okay with this transition from learning in school with their peers to learning at home and existing at home. And so while it's not perfect, and again, that's not every child, right? All of our children learn and behave differently. And so there may be places where we need to provide additional support for our children. But I don't know if it's the eternal optimist in me, but I truly believe our children will be okay. And I do believe that our businesses, our careers, etc., will be intact. And if we have to shift, that there are opportunities. All of us have countless talents, skills, etc., that maybe we have not activated, that might be necessary to activate in this season. And so I want to help people reduce the stress around this situation being so uncertain. And it's not helpful that schools, go back and forth about whether we're going to be in person or not, or the real reality that, here in Georgia, we had people test positive, and so a whole classroom had to quarantine. So those children went to school and have come back home from school. And so I think that that's an honest reality throughout this school year. If I got to make some of the decisions, I probably would say I would prefer we make a decision that we can plan around than kind of going back and forth. But I don't get paid to make those decisions at the district level, so I'll stay in my lane. But what I will say is, we have to breathe. We're probably going to have to practice different relaxation methods more frequently now, whether that's meditation, mindfulness, yoga, exercise, whatever types of things, lighting candles, whatever types of things that you need to do to be able to relax, to bring down your stress levels. It'll be really important, because stress is a silent killer. And too many of us, especially if you're women, like heart issues, all these different things that could really negatively affect us in a huge way, can be correlated to and associated with stress. So we want to do the best that we can to bring down our stress so that we can manage and show up and be present in the best way that we can in this season. The second thing that I would say, and I think maybe one of the more important things, is to reclaim control. I understand that it feels like everything is happening to you, but the reality is that things are happening with you. You have an opportunity to make decisions about how you respond to what is happening, and that's probably the main place where you have unlimited amount of control. You get to control yourself and your reaction to these things. So, I had a period of time where I was like super teed off about like how all over the place things are and what people aren't doing. And I realized like being very angry or frustrated about that wasn't serving me. And so I have to accept that this is where we are. And I have to figure out within that, like, what are the things that are within my control. And so I'll tell you what's really interesting is that when I was pregnant with my son, my 18-month-old, I'm a worrier. I'm a type A. I'm a freak outer. Like, I'm one of those people that just sort of like I can get ramped up really fast. And so when I went into labor, I was like, I don't know. I was very nervous about what labor was going to look like because I, again, can be like over the top. But I actually found myself being probably the most zen I've ever been in my entire life. Like, I distinctly recall the nurse, saying like maybe I should teach a class on like natural birth, which is hysterical if you know me because like I'm a total freak outer. So, but I was really calm through that whole process. And I mean, like, not to share too much information, but ultimately, like, I got to the hospital, we had like a very short amount of time before my son came. So there was no opportunity for what I thought would be like my birth plan to actually happen. Like, we were in there, it was like time to rock and roll. But I actually found myself feeling very calm in that process, despite the fact that it was not going like the way that I thought it was going to or had planned it out. And so what that experience showed me is that I can respond to uncertainty and things not going as expected differently. Like, I'm not wired to have to freak out or get really stressed out about things. And so that may be the case for you as well. Like, you have the opportunity to decide whether the way that you're responding to the circumstances right now are serving you and benefiting you. And if they're not, to choose to do something else. And that's truly something that we can do. We can choose to respond differently. We can choose to focus on different things. We can choose to turn off our phones and the emails and the news. We can choose that, we're going to make this thing work in one setting or the other, regardless of all the other things that are going on. Like, there are a lot of choices that we are able to make, even when it feels like we don't get to choose. And sometimes not choosing is a choice also, right? Like, putting it off on someone else, like, that is a choice also. So I just want you to be mindful of the choices that you're making and recognizing that you still have the power to choose in this circumstance. The choices may not be your favorite or best or the perfect options, but there are still places for you to exercise your own autonomy around making decisions about how things will go. And so I want to make sure, like, the second point is for you to really reclaim control, like to figure out the things that are within your locus of control and manage those things and forget the rest. I cannot control what my child's school district is going to do, what decision that they're going to make. But I have decided that, to me and in my household, with all of the different risks and things that I think are important, that like being in the traditional school setting face to face, while that is a great way and probably one of the better ways that children learn, is not the best option for me in the midst of a global pandemic where numbers are still surging, where we have not bottomed out. We haven't flattened the curve. In Georgia, candidly, in my opinion, we opened the state too soon and opened some crazy things like really soon. It didn't make sense. And so I don't get to make the decisions around what the governor decides or what the school district decides, but I can decide that in my household, this is how I'm going to manage things, and I'm going to shift different things accordingly to make that a possibility. And so I say that to say, I understand we all have different levels of privilege and different ability to make certain decisions, but also we still have the ability to decide. And every decision has a consequence. There's a reaction for every action. So making a decision to educate my child in the home has different consequences. There are things that they both will or will not get on account of that. There's going to be a shift into what my household is, how my house looks, like how my business runs. But I'm making that decision. And I think that we all need to just own the decisions that we're making. And when we defer to other people, recognize that we are also deciding to let other people control certain circumstances for us as well. And the other reason why I would say it's really important for us to also reclaim our control is because our children, hi, Auntie, thank you. Our children are watching. They're watching us. Like I mentioned, I have an 18-year-old and 18-month-old. I have a 17-year-old, soon to be 18. That's crazy. And an 18-month-old. And my 18-month-old reminds me all the time that he's watching, he sees what's happening, even if he's not saying it, because later he'll go back and do it. If I show one thing, he will respond in that same way or do whatever thing that he's seen. He is a total sponge. And he also can sense how I'm feeling, right? So and my 17-year-old too, like when my mood is off, like they sense it. Everybody senses it. If I'm agitated and quick to respond, they sense that and they respond accordingly. And so because I truly believe that as a parent, we're all educators, whether we're formally trained or not, I am teaching my children how to deal with uncertainty while I am going through that. And so I want to be the best model for how to adapt, how to be resilient, how to maintain agency and autonomy and control in situations where I'm not in charge of everything or I don't have the power or ability to fix everything, because that's life. This is a huge life lesson that we are all learning, unfortunately, at this period of time. But I want to make sure that I'm being a great role model for my children. So I know most parents, most of you listening here also want that. And so I just encourage you to, again, figure out what was within your locus of control so that you focus on the things that you can control and make the best out of them and allow all the other things to exist until they're in a position where you can do something about it. So on my 4 steps thing, the first was to relax, breathe, recognize this is going to pass. Second, we talked about reclaiming our control, making decisions, figuring out what are the things that we actually can impact and focusing our energy there as opposed to on things that we cannot control anyway. And making the decision to show up and do things the way that we believe or feel is necessary in this season, despite the fact that a lot is uncertain. The third thing that I would encourage is for you to reestablish routines. Especially for all of my caregivers who are going to be teaching at home with your children, whether you are opting to fully homeschool or your children are learning remotely, and so they're going to be home and there's going to be aspects of that you have to manage. I would encourage you to create routines. And I say that on twofold: routines for yourself as the adult and also routines for your children. And so for a lot of our kids, prior to going home and learning from home last spring, they are home and they do home stuff. And then they're at school and they do school stuff. And so the routines and the expectations are different. In order to have more fluidity, less chaos, more peace, you want to design routines for your children that incorporate learning at home. And I'll say that I was a teacher, like I mentioned, I taught 4th grade here in Georgia. I also coach teachers K through 12. So I've seen, little all the way to grown. Everybody needs routines. And one of the things that we really focused on when we start the school year is learning routines, teaching the routines to our students and actually practicing those. So for example, when I was teaching, I spent a lot of time teaching routines. How do we line up? How do we pass papers to each other? How do we communicate in small group? How do we work independently? How do we work in a group? What are the expectations for all of those things? And we practiced. And sometimes when things didn't go right, we talked about it. Okay, so what's the routine or what's the expectation? How did we meet the expectation? How didn't we meet that? Okay, let's role play and practice so that when we do it the next time, it works better. And so if you're going to be teaching in a classroom, your students at home, your children at home, you absolutely need to create routines for them, especially if you're going to be working as well. And so some of those routines might be, how to work independently. What are the blocks of time and creating those boundaries around when you need to work by yourself. I'm working over here. How do you get my attention if you need help? How do you get my attention if there's an emergency, etc.? You're going to have to teach those routines to your children so that you all can flow and things can work effectively. And I'm telling you, as a former educator, that's how we make it work in the classroom. And a lot of times when classroom management is an issue and classrooms are sort of out of control, it's because there are not clear expectations and routines. And so to improve your life while you are working and homeschooling and doing all of the things, I highly encourage you to create routines, create learning spaces to the extent that you can, so that they know this is where I go to do my work. This is how long I have to sit here. If that means, you get a timer. A timer was like my favorite tool while I was teaching. And then having a timekeeper, usually the child who was most off task was the one that I would assign to be the timekeeper, because they can keep track and let you know when time is up, because trust me, they're looking for things to do. So creating that structure and allowing your child, okay, we have to sit, you need to work on this thing for 20 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever it is, as you grow their ability and their stamina. And when the timer goes off, then you can come and get mommy and we can do whatever type of thing we need to do, right? So that they are learning also to be independent, which is an important life skill, learning how to problem solve, learning how to adapt. All of those are important soft skills that don't necessarily end up on your report card or in the standards that we measure. And whether we're even measuring the right things is a whole separate conversation. But I think it's important to, take this opportunity to teach your children life skills, soft skills, the types of skills that are going to get them from, traditional education to the C-suite, to running their own business, to whatever measure of success you're looking for. Yes, there's a certain level of content knowledge that they need to have, certain skills and training, but there are also the interpersonal skills that are so important and sometimes get devalued in our classrooms. And you have a great opportunity to help teach your children how to think critically, make good decisions. When do I really need to get mom, especially if you have more than one child? How can we solve this ourselves? I used to tell my students when I was teaching, if they had a problem, like, you need to figure it out or I'm going to figure it out. And typically, if I'm going to figure out, nobody's going to like the solution. So it prompted them to try to figure out how to resolve some of their challenges together on their own without me, which is also, again, another great skill. So again, make sure that you're teaching your children routines around how you want things to go. And of course, that starts with you knowing how you want things to go. So ultimately, you as the adult, as the caregiver, you have to create your own routines. You need to design the day that you want. Will every day be perfect? Absolutely not. It's definitely not in the classroom. I'm sure every teacher can tell you that. But you need to have an idea of what an ideal day looks like, so that you know how to track progress towards it. And so that, again, goes back to something that's within your control. You do have the ability to design your day, to create routines for yourself, create routines for your children, and every day work towards making sure that those routines are happening. And so that would be my third tip, would just be to reestablish routines. Maybe the stuff that you were doing before, what you've been doing over the summer. I don't even know if my 17-year-old is up right now. I'm going to be very honest. Like, we kind of just, things have fallen off the wagon. But school's going to be starting again, so we're going to be reestablishing new routines. Like, you have to be ready to go to bed by this time. You have to be up and having taken care of these types of things before this period of time so that you're ready for school. Even though you're going to be going to school on the dining room table again, but we still have to sort of create those routines so that it helps them. And he learns and behaves differently. So routines are really important for him, and like establishing those routines is going to be a process, and it's something that I know I have to be invested in making sure it happens. So the last thing that I will share after all of that is to rest. Sleep is so important. Resting is so important. And oftentimes, we live in a culture where it's like hustle, hustle, run, do all these different things. And we think that by being busy and doing more stuff that we're more productive. But that's actually not necessarily the truth, right? Being productive aligns around doing the right things at the right time with the right amount of intensity and energy. And so you need to prioritize what things actually have to get done, what things you want to get done, because yes, we still get to do things we want, even though the world is not ideal right now. And that goes back to, again, designing your day and establishing those routines. But you need to make sure that you're planning time to rest, some time to be alone, some time to de-stress and relax so that you can show up as your best self. So those are my 4 tips for how to mentally prepare for an uncertain school year. You'll see I am, a planner-esque. And so for me, a lot of those things take actually being intentional, planning them into your day, spending time designing and envisioning what it is you want, how it would feel for all of these things to be true, and then taking the steps to make them a reality. And so my one takeaway, my one call to action for you is to find 15, 20 minutes to really think about how you want this school year to go, regardless of how you are starting the year, whether that's in person or virtually. And especially for those parents that are starting in like 100% remote, virtual, online setting, like really spend some time thinking about what are your non-negotiables? Like, what are the things that have to happen, that you have to be able to survive, thrive? What are the things that you want to do? What are the things that you don't really love to do or maybe aren't really necessary to do? And really sort of having a list of that so that you can design around your non-negotiables and your wants and figure out how you can delegate those things that either you don't have to be the one to do them. Last week, I was doing a lot of different tasks that I was like, I really don't need to be the person doing this. Like, it actually is ridiculous that I'm the person doing this. Somebody else could do this for far less than what it's costing me to do this, given all the other things that I have to do. So I am growing in my ability to delegate, to let go of being the one to do everything and allowing other people to do stuff so that I can focus on the high level work that I need to do professionally and the way that I want to show up personally as a mother, a wife, a daughter, a human, a woman unto myself. So I just, again, would encourage you to spend some time to really design what these first few weeks of school, first few, semester, or if you're, planning to go the whole school year, what you want this to look like so that we can start taking steps to build in the structure and support that you need to make that happen. So that's all I have for you. I've yapped long enough. I will share some resources on my page, that Psychology Today article that says, our kids they're doing okay, because that definitely gave me some a sense of relief, as well as some different sort of productivity planning type resources that you can use to help you start thinking about how you design the next stretch of time, despite the fact that things are uncertain, how you choose what things you're going to focus on, and the routines that you create to make sure that you maximize the positives during this time. So that's all I have. If this was helpful, definitely like my page, follow me on social media, and share it with your friends. If you have questions, please add them into the comments. I spend a lot of time talking to my camera, and I'd love to talk with more people. So please do put in any type of comments, questions, etc. I'd love to engage and share any of the knowledge that I've gained from practicing law, running my own business, being a mom, and being a former educator. So let's connect, let's chat, and let's figure out how to make the best out of this situation. All right, have a great weekend.